Imagine this, it's the middle of winter in America. The snow outside is thick, the air is freezing, and all you want is a warm place to call home. But instead of comfort, you find yourself standing on the sidewalk, shivering, because your landlord just kicked you out with no mercy. That was my reality. But what he didn't know was that one day, I would own everything he once had. I lived in a small apartment in Ohio with my wife and our 6-year-old daughter. Life wasn't easy. I worked 2 jobs, a morning shift at a diner and night shifts at a warehouse. My wife picked up part-time babysitting whenever she could. We were struggling, yes, but we always paid our rent on time. Our landlord, Mr. Collins, was a man everyone in the building feared. He was greedy, arrogant, and ruthless. He didn't care if you were sick, jobless, or raising kids. For him, tenants were nothing but walking dollar signs. Still, I kept my head down. I figured as long as I paid my rent, I'd be safe. But I was wrong. One evening, in late December, just 3 days before Christmas, Mr. Collins came knocking on our door. He didn't even wait for me to answer. He barged in and handed me a paper. It was an eviction notice. I was shocked. "This has to be a mistake," I told him. "We've never missed a rent payment." But Mr. Collins just smirked. "I've got new tenants lined up who can pay double what you're paying. You've got 1 week to move out. If you're not gone, I'll throw your things on the street." I begged him. I reminded him that my daughter was only 6, that it was Christmas, that we had nowhere else to go. But his face was like stone. He simply said, "Business is business," and walked out. We tried to fight it, but Collins was smart. He found loopholes, used shady lawyers, and within days we were standing outside in the cold, with our bags, while new tenants walked into our old apartment. We spent Christmas Eve in a shelter. My daughter cried herself to sleep, asking why Santa couldn't find us that year. My wife tried to stay strong, but I could see the pain in her eyes. I felt like a failure. Everything I worked for, every sacrifice I made, had been thrown away by one greedy man. For months, we struggled to find stability. We bounced between shelters, friends' couches, and cheap motels. Each night, I swore to myself, one day, I'll make things right. One day, he'll pay. Years passed, and slowly, things started to change. I worked harder than ever. I saved every dollar I could. I studied real estate at night, determined to never be powerless again. At first, it seemed impossible. I was just a poor tenant who once lived in a shelter. But I refused to give up. I invested in small fixer-upper houses, worked on them myself, and flipped them for profit. Little by little, I built my savings, my knowledge, and my reputation. By year 7, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I owned 3 properties, rented them out legally and fairly, and had a growing business. But one thing never left my mind, Mr. Collins. One afternoon, while scanning listings for potential investments, I saw something that made my heart race. It was Collins's building. The very same one he had thrown us out of all those years ago. And guess what? It was up for foreclosure. Turns out, his greed had caught up to him. He raised rents so high that tenants left. The building sat half empty. Maintenance costs piled up. The bank was about to take it. This was my chance. I moved fast. Using the money I had saved, and with help from my new connections in real estate, I bought the building. The same building where my daughter once cried on Christmas Eve. The same building Collins had kicked us out of. But the story doesn't end there. A few months later, I arranged a meeting with all the tenants to introduce myself as the new landlord. They were nervous, probably expecting another greedy owner. But I promised them fair rent, quick repairs, and respect. The relief on their faces reminded me why I had started this journey. And then Collins walked in. Yes. He was still living in one of the smaller units in the very building he once ruled over. Only now, the roles were reversed. He was behind on rent, struggling financially, and completely unaware that I was the one who owned the property. When he finally realized who I was, his face went pale. Collins begged me for leniency. He tried to act friendly, as if we had some kind of history worth saving. But I reminded him of his words years ago, business is business. I didn't throw him out immediately. No. I let him stay, but under strict rules. He paid full rent like everyone else, with late fees if he missed. For the first time in his life, he was forced to follow the rules he had once abused. Within a year, he couldn't keep up. He moved out quietly, leaving behind the empire he once thought he owned. And me? I stood there, holding the keys to the building that was once my nightmare, now my victory. So, what's the lesson? Life has a way of turning tables. The man who threw my family into the cold now had nothing, while I built everything from scratch. When people treat you unfairly, when they abuse their power, remember this: patience, persistence, and hard work are the best forms of revenge. Because one day, the landlord who kicked me out ended up paying rent to me.